Question 1. Consider a global logistics consortium that successfully transitioned to ISO 28000-2007. They are now facing a complex threat landscape characterized by sophisticated cyber-physical attacks targeting automated warehousing systems and the increasing use of anonymized digital identities to facilitate cargo theft and diversion. Which of the following strategic security enhancements, directly informed by the principles of ISO 28000-2007, would be most critical for the consortium to implement to address these specific emerging threats? Option A. Focusing solely on enhancing physical security measures at all transit points, including increased guard patrols and the installation of more CCTV cameras, as the primary response to the observed threats. Option B. Implementing a comprehensive, layered security architecture that integrates advanced intrusion detection systems for operational technology environments, robust identity and access management for all digital interfaces, and secure development practices for any new EOT-enabled tracking devices. Option C. Developing a new internal code of conduct that explicitly prohibits employees from discussing cybersecurity threats to maintain operational secrecy and prevent panic. Option D. Investing heavily in public relations campaigns to assure stakeholders of the company's security posture without making significant changes to existing operational technology or digital security protocols. Correct answer is B. Implementing a comprehensive, layered security architecture that integrates advanced intrusion detection systems for operational technology environments, robust identity and access management for all digital interfaces, and secure development practices for any new EOT-enabled tracking devices. Explanation: the transition from ISO 28000-2002 to ISO 28000-2007 involved significant updates to align with evolving security threats and management system principles. A key aspect of this transition was the integration of a more robust risk-based approach, emphasizing the proactive identification and mitigation of potential vulnerabilities. The 2007 version specifically addressed emerging threats such as cyber-physical attacks, insider threats facilitated by advanced technologies, and the increased reliance on interconnected digital systems within supply chains. It also incorporated lessons learned from global security events and evolving regulatory landscapes, such as those influenced by international conventions and national security directives. The standards framework encourages organizations to continuously monitor their security environment, adapt their security measures based on intelligence and risk assessments, and ensure that technological advancements are leveraged to enhance, rather than compromise, supply chain integrity. This includes evaluating the security implications of new technologies like the Internet of Things, EOT in logistics, advanced analytics for threat detection, and blockchain for transaction security. The focus is on building resilience and adaptability in the face of a dynamic threat landscape. Question 2. Considering the strategic integration of ISO 28000-2007 with ISO 9001-2015 and ISO 14001-2015 within a multinational logistics provider, which of the following approaches would most effectively leverage the common elements and enhance overall organizational resilience and compliance with regulations like the Customs Trade Partnership Against Terrorism (CTPAT) and the International Maritime Dangerous Goods (IMG) Code? Option A. Implementing ISO 9001 and ISO 14001 as foundational standards, and then adding ISO 28000-2007 as a supplementary layer, with security objectives being treated as distinct and independent from quality and environmental goals to avoid complexity. Option B. Prioritizing the implementation of ISO 28000-2007 first, and then retrofitting its security controls into the existing ISO 9001 and ISO 14001 systems, focusing solely on regulatory compliance without considering broader operational efficiencies. Option C. Developing separate management systems for each standard, with periodic audits to identify any overlap, and then creating ad hoc cross-functional teams to address any identified security, quality, or environmental issues as they arise. Option D. Establishing a single, overarching integrated management system that uses a common framework for risk assessment, policy development, and performance monitoring, ensuring that security, quality, and environmental objectives are mutually supportive, and that operational controls address potential interdependencies between these domains. The correct answer is D. Establishing a single, overarching integrated management system that uses a common framework for risk assessment, policy development, and performance monitoring, ensuring that security, quality, and environmental objectives are mutually supportive, and that operational controls address potential interdependencies between these domains. Explanation: the integration of ISO 28000-2007 with other management system standards, such as ISO 9001, Quality Management, and ISO 14001, Environmental Management, is a key consideration for organizations seeking a holistic approach to business operations. While each standard addresses distinct areas, their underlying principles and structures, particularly the high-level structure HLS, common to newer ISO standards, facilitate integration. ISO 28000-2007 focuses on supply chain security, aiming to protect assets, including people, information, infrastructure, and goods, throughout the supply chain. ISO 9001-2015, on the other hand, emphasizes customer satisfaction and the consistent provision of products and services that meet customer and applicable statutory and regulatory requirements. ISO 14001-2015 focuses on an organization's environmental management system, helping it to manage its environmental responsibilities in a systematic manner that contributes to the environmental pillar of sustainability. When integrating these standards, an organization must ensure that the requirements of ISO 28000-2007 are mapped to the relevant clauses of other standards. For instance, risk assessment and management, a core element of ISO 28000-2007, can be aligned with the risk-based thinking required by ISO 9001-2015 and ISO 14001-2015. The operational planning and control requirements of ISO 28000-2007, which address security measures in logistics, transport, and storage, can be integrated with the operational processes managed under ISO 9001-2015 and ISO 14001-2015. Furthermore, the communication and training aspects mandated by ISO 28000-2007 for security awareness can be incorporated into existing training programs for quality and environmental management. The ultimate goal of such integration is to achieve synergistic benefits, reducing duplication of effort, improving overall management system effectiveness, and enhancing organizational resilience. The alignment of objectives, policies, and the use of common terminology and documentation structures are critical for successful integration. For example, a security threat identified under ISO 28000-2007 might also have implications for product quality, ISO 9001, or environmental impact, ISO 14001, necessitating a coordinated response. Question 3. Considering the transition to ISO 28000-2007, what is the primary consideration for retaining obsolete documented information related to a security incident that occurred during the transit of goods through a jurisdiction with stringent customs audit requirements, such as the United Arab Emirates, for a period exceeding the immediate operational need? Option A. To allow for the possibility of future contractual disputes with logistics partners involved in the original shipment, even if no such disputes have arisen. Option B. To fulfill an internal requirement for historical data archiving, irrespective of external legal mandates or the relevance to current security protocols. Option C. To serve as a basis for developing new training modules on incident response, even if the specific incident is no longer considered a current threat. Option D. To provide evidence of compliance with the standard and relevant legal/regulatory obligations for potential future audits or investigations by authorities like the UAE Federal Customs Authority. Correct answer is D. To provide evidence of compliance with the standard and relevant legal/regulatory obligations for potential future audits or investigations by authorities like the UAE Federal Customs Authority. Explanation: the transition to ISO 28000-2007 from a previous security management system, or even from no formal system, necessitates a robust framework for documented information control. This control encompasses the creation, updating, and management of all records that demonstrate conformity to the standard and the effectiveness of the Supply Chain Security Management System, SCSMS. For documented information to be effective, it must be identifiable, retrievable, protected, and retained for a specified period, and then disposed of appropriately. The standard emphasizes that documented information required by the SCSMS and by the standard itself shall be controlled. This control involves ensuring that documented information is reviewed and updated where necessary and that changes are readily available. Furthermore, obsolete documented information must be retained in some form for a defined period, often driven by legal or regulatory requirements, such as customs declarations or transport manifests that might be subject to audit or investigation long after a shipment is completed. The retention period for critical security procedures, incident reports, and risk assessments would be determined by the organization's own policy, informed by legal obligations and the need for historical data to inform future risk management strategies. For instance, if a specific security protocol was implemented to mitigate a particular threat identified in a customs directive from a country like Singapore, the records demonstrating its implementation and effectiveness would need to be retained for at least the duration specified by Singapore's relevant customs or trade regulations, plus any internal policy requirements for long-term trend analysis. This ensures that the organization can demonstrate compliance and continuous improvement throughout the life cycle of its supply chain security processes. Question 4. A global logistics firm specializing in the secure transport of high-value pharmaceuticals is undergoing its transition to ISO 28000-2007. During the initial phase of understanding the organization's context, what is the most critical external factor that the firm must meticulously analyze to ensure compliance and effective security management, considering the nature of its cargo and international operations? Option A. Specific security directives and import regulations from destination countries impacting pharmaceutical transit. Option B. The fluctuating cost of fuel affecting overall transportation expenses. Option C. Competitor pricing strategies for similar logistics services. Option D. The company's internal employee turnover rate in warehouse operations. The correct answer is A. Specific security directives and import regulations from destination countries impacting pharmaceutical transit. Explanation. The context of the organization, as defined in ISO 28000-2007, requires a thorough understanding of external and internal issues that can affect the organization's ability to achieve its intended outcomes related to supply chain security. This includes identifying interested parties and their relevant requirements. For global logistics providers specializing in high-value pharmaceuticals, crucial external issues would encompass evolving international trade regulations, geopolitical instability in transit regions, and the specific security protocols mandated by importing countries, such as those enforced by the U.S. Food and Drug Administration, FDA, for pharmaceutical shipments. Internal issues would involve the organization's own operational capabilities, technological infrastructure for tracking and monitoring, and the security awareness and training of its personnel. The identification of these factors is foundational for establishing the scope of the supply chain security management system and for developing appropriate security measures that align with both organizational objectives and regulatory compliance, ensuring the integrity and safety of the pharmaceutical products throughout their journey. This proactive identification and analysis of the organizational context are vital for the effective implementation and continuous improvement of the supply chain security management system, directly supporting the transition to a robust security framework. Question 5. Considering the transition to ISO 28000-2007, a global logistics firm specializing in high-value electronics is implementing enhanced physical security measures for its transcontinental freight operations. This includes the adoption of tamper-evident seals with unique serial numbers and encrypted tracking devices for all container shipments. Which of the following actions would most effectively demonstrate the firm's commitment to integrating these new measures within its existing supply chain security management system, in alignment with ISO 28000-2007 principles and relevant international security standards like CTPAT? Option A. Relying on the security certifications of the seal and device manufacturers as sufficient evidence of their effectiveness, and discontinuing all previous security protocols to avoid redundancy. Option B. Conducting a comprehensive risk assessment to identify potential vulnerabilities associated with the new seals and tracking devices. updating the supply chain security policy to reflect their use, and providing specialized training to all personnel involved in container handling and monitoring, while also ensuring compliance with CTPAT validation requirements for these specific measures. Option C. Immediately deploying the new seals and tracking devices on all shipments, assuming their inherent security features will automatically enhance the overall supply chain security posture without further procedural changes. Option D. Focusing solely on the technical specifications of the tracking devices and seals, and instructing the IT department to integrate the data streams into the existing inventory management system without involving operational staff in the implementation process. The correct answer is B. Conducting a comprehensive risk assessment to identify potential vulnerabilities associated with the new seals and tracking devices, updating the supply chain security policy to reflect their use, and providing specialized training to all personnel involved in container handling and monitoring, while also ensuring compliance with CTPAT validation requirements for these specific measures. Explanation: the transition from an older security management system to ISO 28000-2007 requires a thorough understanding of how to integrate new security protocols across all facets of a supply chain. ISO 28000-2007 emphasizes a risk-based approach, necessitating the identification, assessment, and treatment of security risks that could impact the flow of goods and services. When considering the implementation of new security measures, particularly in a transition phase, a critical step is to ensure these measures are not only effective, but also harmonized with existing operational processes and relevant legal frameworks. For instance, a company dealing with international shipments must consider regulations like the Customs Trade Partnership Against Terrorism (CTPAT) or similar national security programs, which often have specific requirements for cargo screening, container integrity, and personnel vetting. The core principle is to establish a comprehensive security management system that addresses potential threats at every point in the supply chain, from origin to final delivery. This involves a systematic process of defining security objectives, implementing controls, monitoring performance, and continually improving the system. Effectiveness of this transition hinges on the ability to embed security consciousness into the organizational culture and operational procedures, ensuring that security is viewed as an integral component of business continuity and resilience, rather than an isolated add-on. This proactive stance helps mitigate vulnerabilities and enhances the overall security posture of the supply chain against a wide array of threats, including theft, tampering, and unauthorized access. The successful integration of new security measures necessitates careful planning, stakeholder engagement, and a commitment to ongoing evaluation to adapt to evolving threats and regulatory landscapes. Question 6. Consider a global logistics provider that has recently undergone a transition to align its supply chain security management system with the principles of ISO 28000-2007. To drive continuous improvement following this transition, which combination of activities would most effectively enhance the system's ongoing robustness and responsiveness to evolving security risks, taking into account the proactive and reactive elements required by the standard? Option A. Implementing a reactive approach focused exclusively on addressing security breaches after they occur, without proactive risk assessment or preventative measures. Option B. Conducting a one-time comprehensive review of all security policies and procedures immediately after the transition audit, followed by annual stakeholder satisfaction surveys. Option C. Systematically analyzing internal audit findings, performance metrics related to cargo integrity, and feedback from customs authorities regarding border transit compliance. Option D. Relying solely on external security consultants to identify potential vulnerabilities without engaging internal operational teams in the review process. The correct answer is C. Systematically analyzing internal audit findings, performance metrics related to cargo integrity, and feedback from customs authorities regarding border transit compliance. Explanation: the core principle of continuous improvement within a management system, such as that outlined by ISO 28000-2007, revolves around a systematic approach to enhancing effectiveness and efficiency. When considering the transition from an older standard or an initial implementation, a key aspect of improvement involves leveraging insights gained from various sources. One critical source is the feedback loop generated by internal and external audits, which are designed to identify nonconformities and areas for enhancement. Another vital component is the analysis of performance data, which provides objective evidence of how the security management system is functioning. Furthermore, input from stakeholders, including employees, customers, and regulatory bodies, offers valuable perspectives on operational strengths and weaknesses. The integration of lessons learned from security incidents, even those that did not result in major disruptions, is also paramount for proactive risk mitigation. Therefore, a comprehensive strategy for improvement necessitates the systematic collection, analysis, and actioning of information derived from audits, performance monitoring, stakeholder input, and incident reviews. This holistic approach ensures that the supply chain security management system evolves to meet emerging threats and organizational objectives effectively. Question 7. A global logistics provider, Vanguard Freight Solutions, is undertaking the transition from its existing ISO 28000-2007 supply chain security management system to the latest ISO 28000-2022 standard. During the risk assessment phase for the transition, Vanguard identifies a new category of cyber-enabled threats targeting their automated customs clearance systems, which were not as prevalent or sophisticated under the 2007 framework. Considering the principles of ISO 28000-2022 and its alignment with modern management system requirements, which of the following actions best reflects the enhanced approach to risk management during this transition? Option A. Conduct a standalone risk assessment solely for the cyber-enabled threats, updating only the security procedures directly related to the customs clearance systems without considering broader organizational impacts or strategic alignment. Option B. Focus exclusively on the financial impact of potential cyber attacks, quantifying the direct monetary losses, and using this as the sole criterion for prioritizing risk mitigation efforts, disregarding operational or reputational consequences. Option C. Integrate the assessment of these new cyber-enabled threats into the organization's overall business risk register and develop a comprehensive risk treatment plan that includes technological, procedural, and personnel security controls, ensuring alignment with the organization's strategic objectives and stakeholder expectations. Option D. Revert to the risk assessment methodologies employed under ISO 28000-2007, assuming that the existing threat mitigation strategies will adequately address these emerging cyber risks due to their foundational security principles. Correct answer is C. Integrate the assessment of these new cyber-enabled threats into the organization's overall business risk register and develop a comprehensive risk treatment plan that includes technological, procedural, and personnel security controls, ensuring alignment with the organization's strategic objectives and stakeholder expectations. Explanation: the transition from ISO 28000-2007 to ISO 28000-2022 involves a significant shift in the management system approach, particularly concerning risk management. While ISO 28000-2007 provided a framework for supply chain security, the updated standard, ISO 28000-2022, aligns with the high-level structure, HLS, common to all ISO management system standards, emphasizing a more integrated and strategic approach. A key change is the enhanced focus on context of the organization, leadership commitment, and the integration of security management into the overall business strategy. Specifically, regarding risk assessment and management, ISO 28000-2022 requires organizations to determine external and internal issues relevant to their purpose and that affect their ability to achieve the intended outcomes of the supply chain security management system. This includes identifying stakeholders and their requirements. The standard mandates a systematic process for identifying, analyzing, and evaluating risks to the supply chain, considering the likelihood and impact of security threats. Crucially, it requires the establishment, implementation, and maintenance of processes for managing these identified risks. This involves selecting and implementing appropriate security measures and controls to mitigate unacceptable risks, ensuring that these measures are effective and regularly reviewed. The updated standard also places a greater emphasis on the continuous improvement of the management system, requiring organizations to monitor, measure, analyze, and evaluate the performance of their security measures and processes. This iterative process of assessment, planning, implementation, and review is fundamental to achieving and maintaining an effective supply chain security posture in line with the evolving threat landscape and regulatory requirements, such as those related to international trade facilitation and cargo security initiatives. The transition necessitates a reevaluation of existing risk assessment methodologies to ensure alignment with the broader organizational context and strategic objectives. Question 8. Considering the transition to ISO 28000-2007 for a logistics company specializing in the secure transport of sensitive medical isotopes, what enhancement to existing facility access controls would most effectively align with the standard's emphasis on a comprehensive, risk-based approach to supply chain security beyond basic entry logging? Option A. Implementing a multi-factor authentication system for all personnel accessing high-security zones, including biometric scans and unique, time-sensitive digital tokens, alongside a dynamic visitor logging system that cross-references entry with pre-approved shipment manifests. Option B. Installing a centralized CCTV surveillance system with remote monitoring capabilities covering all internal and external areas of the facility. Option C. Upgrading all perimeter fencing to include motion sensing technology and increasing the frequency of external security patrols around the facility perimeter. Option D. Conducting annual security awareness training for all employees, focusing on general threat identification and reporting procedures. The correct answer is A. Implementing a multi-factor authentication system for all personnel accessing high-security zones, including biometric scans and unique, time-sensitive digital tokens, alongside a dynamic visitor logging system that cross-references entry with pre-approved shipment manifests. Explanation: the transition to ISO 28000-2007 from earlier security management frameworks necessitates a thorough reevaluation of existing facility security measures. Specifically, the standard emphasizes a risk-based approach, requiring organizations to identify, assess, and treat security risks throughout the supply chain. For a facility handling high-value electronic components, a critical aspect of this transition involves enhancing access control mechanisms beyond simple badge readers. This includes implementing layered security controls, such as biometric verification for sensitive areas, manned guard posts at key entry points, and a robust visitor management system that logs detailed information and issues temporary, time-limited access credentials. Furthermore, the standard promotes continuous monitoring and review of security measures. This involves regular audits of access logs, periodic testing of alarm systems, and incorporating feedback from security personnel and relevant stakeholders to identify potential vulnerabilities or areas for improvement. The integration of these enhanced physical security measures, coupled with a strong emphasis on personnel vetting and training, directly addresses the core requirements of ISO 28000-2007 for establishing and maintaining a secure supply chain environment. The goal is to create a resilient security posture that can adapt to evolving threats and maintain the integrity of the goods being transported. Question 9. When a global logistics provider is transitioning its operations to align with ISO 28000-2007, and a key objective is to enhance the security of its transcontinental freight movements by reducing the likelihood of cargo tampering, what fundamental components must an effective action plan for this objective include to ensure successful implementation and measurable improvement, considering the integration of new tracking technologies and updated personnel vetting procedures? Option A. A comprehensive risk assessment report, a list of potential threats, a general statement of intent to improve security, and an external audit schedule. Option B. Broad security awareness training for all staff, procurement of advanced surveillance equipment, and a contingency plan for major disruptions. Option C. Clearly defined security tasks, assigned personnel responsibilities, specified timelines for completion, required resource allocation, and measurable performance indicators linked to cargo integrity. Option D. A review of existing insurance policies, a comparative analysis of competitor security practices, and the establishment of a dedicated security department. The correct answer is C. Clearly defined security tasks, assigned personnel responsibilities, specified timelines for completion, required resource allocation, and measurable performance indicators linked to cargo integrity. Explanation: the development of action plans to achieve supply chain security objectives under ISO 28000-2007 requires a systematic approach that considers resource allocation, timelines, responsibilities, and performance metrics. When transitioning to a new standard or enhancing an existing system, it is crucial to identify specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound, SMART, objectives. For each objective, a detailed action plan must be formulated. This plan should outline the specific activities needed to accomplish the objective, assign clear responsibilities to individuals or teams, establish realistic timelines for each activity and the overall objective, and define the resources, financial, human, technological, required. Furthermore, the plan must include mechanisms for monitoring progress and evaluating the effectiveness of the implemented actions against the defined objectives. This involves setting key performance indicators, KPI, that directly relate to the security objectives. For instance, if an objective is to reduce unauthorized access to high-value goods during transit, an action plan might include implementing enhanced tracking devices, providing advanced security training for drivers, and establishing stricter access control protocols at staging points. The KPIs could be the number of security breaches per 1,000 shipments, the percentage of shipments successfully tracked in real time, or the completion rate of security training modules. The transition process necessitates a thorough review of current practices, identification of gaps against the standard's requirements, and the creation of a roadmap with defined milestones. The action plan serves as this roadmap, ensuring that the transition is managed effectively and that the intended security improvements are realized. It is not merely about listing tasks, but about creating a coherent strategy that integrates security into the broader supply chain operations, aligning with relevant regulatory frameworks such as the Customs Trade Partnership Against Terrorism (CTPAT), or similar national security initiatives that complement ISO 28000. Question 10. When transitioning a supply chain security management system from ISO 28000-2007 to incorporate more contemporary threat landscapes and regulatory shifts, such as those influenced by evolving trade facilitation frameworks, what is the most critical consideration regarding the existing supply chain risk assessment methodology? Option A. Focusing solely on the financial implications of security breaches, neglecting other critical aspects like operational disruption or reputational damage. Option B. Ensuring the methodology is capable of identifying, analyzing, and evaluating emerging and evolving threats and their potential impact on the integrity and continuity of the supply chain. Option C. Confirming that the methodology strictly adheres to the original documentation and procedures outlined in the 2007 version of the standard, regardless of external changes. Option D. Prioritizing the reduction of all identified risks to zero, irrespective of the cost or feasibility of mitigation measures. The correct answer is B. Ensuring the methodology is capable of identifying, analyzing, and evaluating emerging and evolving threats and their potential impact on the integrity and continuity of the supply chain. Explanation: the transition from ISO 28000-2007 to a later version, such as ISO 28000-2022, involves a comprehensive review and potential update of the supply chain security management system. A key aspect of this transition is the reevaluation of the supply chain risk assessment methodology. ISO 28000-2007, while foundational, may not fully encompass the dynamic nature of modern supply chain threats, which include sophisticated cyber attacks, geopolitical instability, and the increasing complexity of global logistics. The standard emphasizes the need for a systematic approach to identify, analyze, and evaluate risks. When transitioning, organizations must consider how their existing risk assessment framework aligns with updated best practices and regulatory requirements, such as those influenced by international conventions like the Framework of Standards on Trade Facilitation and Security, FAO, or specific national security directives. A robust risk assessment methodology should not only identify potential threats and vulnerabilities, but also quantify the likelihood and impact of these risks to prioritize mitigation efforts. This involves selecting appropriate tools and techniques that can effectively model complex interdependencies within the supply chain. For instance, scenario analysis, fault tree analysis, and quantitative risk modeling are often employed. The transition process requires a critical review of the current methodology to ensure it remains fit for purpose, particularly in light of evolving threat landscapes and the need to integrate security considerations seamlessly into business operations. The goal is to enhance the resilience and security of the supply chain by proactively addressing potential disruptions and security breaches. Therefore, the most appropriate step during this transition concerning the risk assessment methodology is to ensure it can effectively identify and evaluate emerging threats and their potential impact on the supply chain's integrity and continuity. Question 11. Global Freight Solutions, a logistics provider specializing in high-value electronics, is undertaking its transition to ISO 28000-2007. During the initial phase of understanding interested parties' needs and expectations, as mandated by Clause 4. 2. The organization identifies several groups with a vested interest in its supply chain security, considering the specific nature of their business and the regulatory landscape. Which of the following best represents a comprehensive approach to identifying and prioritizing relevant interested parties and their security-related requirements for the transition? Option A. Conducting a broad survey of all potential stakeholders, including the general public and media, to gauge general perceptions of supply chain security without prioritizing specific actionable requirements. Option B. Prioritizing interested parties based on the volume of goods handled, assuming that higher volumes inherently correlate with higher security concerns and thus greater relevance. Option C. Systematically mapping all entities that interact with or are impacted by Global Freight Solutions supply chain, categorizing their influence and the criticality of their security-related expectations, and aligning these with specific ISO 28000-2007 clauses. Option D. Focusing solely on regulatory bodies and direct contractual customers, as they are the primary drivers of compliance and business continuity in the electronics logistics sector. The correct answer is C. Systematically mapping all entities that interact with or are impacted by Global Freight Solutions supply chain, categorizing their influence and the criticality of their security-related expectations, and aligning these with specific ISO 28000-2007 clauses. Explanation: the transition from an older standard to ISO 28000-2007 involves understanding how existing security management systems and practices align with the new requirements. Interested parties, as defined in ISO 28000-2007, are individuals or groups that have an interest in or are affected by the security of the supply chain. Clause 4.2 of ISO 28000-2007, understanding the needs and expectations of interested parties, mandates that an organization determine which interested parties are relevant to its supply chain security management system, their requirements and expectations, and which of these are likely to become relevant requirements through the organization's supply chain security management system. This involves a systematic process of identification, analysis, and prioritization. For a company like Global Freight Solutions, which handles high-value electronics, key interested parties might include regulatory bodies, e.g., customs authorities enforcing trade security initiatives like CTPAT or AEO, customers concerned about product integrity and timely delivery, insurers assessing risk and coverage, and employees involved in the physical handling and transit of goods. The organization must then determine which of these parties' requirements and expectations are critical for its supply chain security. For instance, customs regulations represent mandatory requirements, while customer expectations might focus on enhanced visibility and reduced transit times, which indirectly impact security by minimizing dwell times. Employees' expectations might relate to safe working environments and clear security protocols. The transition process necessitates evaluating how the current system addresses these identified needs and expectations, and identifying any gaps that need to be closed to meet the ISO 28000-2007 requirements. This proactive approach ensures that the new management system is robust and addresses all pertinent stakeholder concerns, thereby enhancing overall supply chain security and compliance. Question 12. When developing the initial supply chain security policy for a global logistics provider specializing in high-value electronics and operating across multiple continents with varying regulatory landscapes, which of the following considerations is paramount for ensuring compliance with ISO 28000-2007 and effective risk mitigation? Option A. The policy should primarily reflect the security mandates of the organization's largest trading partner to ensure streamlined customs clearance, even if it overlooks specific risks in other operational areas. Option B. A comprehensive analysis of the organization's specific supply chain vulnerabilities, threat landscape, and applicable legal/regulatory requirements across all operating jurisdictions. Option C. A primary focus on implementing advanced technological surveillance systems as the core of the security policy, assuming technology alone can address all potential security breaches. Option D. The adoption of a universally applicable set of security protocols based on the most stringent international standards, irrespective of the specific risks faced by individual supply chain segments. The correct answer is B. A comprehensive analysis of the organization's specific supply chain vulnerabilities, threat landscape, and applicable legal/regulatory requirements across all operating jurisdictions. Explanation. The establishment of a supply chain security policy under ISO 28000-2007 requires a foundational understanding of the organization's specific context and security objectives. Clause 4.2. Context of the organization mandates that the organization shall determine external and internal issues that are relevant to its purpose and that affect its ability to achieve the intended outcome of its supply chain security management system. This includes understanding the operational environment, the nature of goods transported, potential threats, vulnerabilities, and the legal and regulatory framework applicable to its operations, such as the Customs Trade Partnership Against Terrorism (CTPAT) requirements or specific national security directives. The policy must therefore be informed by a thorough risk assessment and align with the organization's overall business strategy and security culture. It needs to articulate the commitment to security, define the scope of the management system, and establish a framework for setting security objectives. A policy derived solely from generic industry best practices without considering the unique characteristics of the organization's supply chain, its specific cargo, the jurisdictions it operates within, and its risk appetite would be insufficient and potentially ineffective in meeting the standards requirements. The policy serves as the guiding document for all subsequent security activities and must be clearly communicated and understood throughout the organization, and where appropriate, to relevant interested parties. Question 13. When transitioning to an ISO 28000-2007 compliant supply chain security management system, what fundamental communication process element is most critical for ensuring both internal awareness and external stakeholder alignment regarding evolving security protocols and risk mitigation strategies, particularly in light of international security initiatives like the Container Security Initiative, CSI? Option A. Relying on informal communication channels and ad hoc updates to inform supply chain partners about security changes, assuming they will proactively seek necessary information. Option B. Establishing a multi-directional communication framework that clearly defines the scope, frequency, and responsibility for disseminating security-related information to all relevant internal departments and external supply chain partners. Option C. Implementing a centralized communication platform solely for reporting security incidents to regulatory bodies, thereby fulfilling the primary external communication obligation. Option D. Focusing communication efforts exclusively on senior management to ensure top-level buy-in, with minimal dissemination to operational staff or external entities. Correct answer is B. Establishing a multi-directional communication framework that clearly defines the scope, frequency, and responsibility for disseminating security-related information to all relevant internal departments and external supply chain partners. Explanation. The transition to ISO 28000-2007 from previous security management frameworks or ad hoc approaches necessitates a robust communication strategy. Clause 4.2. 1 of ISO 28000-2007, communication, outlines the requirements for establishing, implementing, and maintaining communication processes. This includes communication with internal stakeholders, e.g., employees, management, and external parties, e.g., suppliers, customers, regulatory bodies. The standard emphasizes the need to communicate relevant security information effectively. When considering the transition, an organization must define what information is to be communicated, when, with whom, how, and by whom. This involves identifying critical security risks, mitigation measures, policy updates, and performance indicators. A key aspect is ensuring that communication facilitates the integration of security management into the overall business operations and supports continuous improvement. Without a clear framework for communicating security-related matters, the effectiveness of the entire supply chain security management system, SCSMS, can be compromised, leading to misunderstandings, non-compliance with regulations like the Customs Trade Partnership Against Terrorism, CTPAT, or similar national security programs, and an inability to respond appropriately to emerging threats. Therefore, establishing a systematic approach to communication, encompassing both internal alignment and external engagement, is paramount for a successful transition and ongoing compliance. Question 14. When establishing or transitioning to a supply chain security management system, SCSMS, compliant with ISO 28000-2007, a critical initial step involves identifying the internal and external factors that can impact the system's effectiveness. Consider an international logistics provider specializing in high-value electronics. Which of the following sets of issues most accurately reflects the typical internal and external considerations for such an organization in the context of SCSMS transition? Option A. Internal. The company's cafeteria menu, the aesthetic design of its vehicles, and the number of holidays observed by staff. External. Global fashion trends, the popularity of online streaming services, and the artistic merit of shipping container liveries. Option B. Internal. The brand reputation of the logistics provider, the quality of its marketing materials, and the availability of office supplies. External. Consumer preferences for eco-friendly packaging, social media trends, and local weather patterns affecting road transport. Option C. Internal. Employee training programs on cargo handling procedures, IT infrastructure resilience for tracking shipments, and the company's financial capacity for security upgrades. External. Evolving cyber threats targeting logistics data, international customs regulations in key transit countries, and the security protocols of third-party carriers used for final mile delivery. Option D. Internal. The company's annual budget for office furniture, the preference for specific software vendors for non-security-related functions, and the company's policy on remote work for administrative staff. External. The price of oil on the global market, the availability of public transportation for employees, and the cultural significance of local festivals. The correct answer is C. Internal. Employee training programs on cargo handling procedures, IT infrastructure resilience for tracking shipments, and the company's financial capacity for security upgrades. External. Evolving cyber threats targeting logistics data, international customs regulations in key transit countries, and the security protocols of third-party carriers used for final mile delivery. Explanation. Determining external and internal issues relevant to a supply chain security management system, SCSMS, under ISO 28000-2007 requires a comprehensive understanding of the organization's operating context. Internal issues are those arising from within the organization, such as its resources, capabilities, culture, policies, and processes. For example, an organization's financial stability, the technical expertise of its personnel, or its existing security protocols are internal factors. External issues, conversely, originate from outside the organization and encompass its operating environment. These can include legal and regulatory frameworks, economic conditions, technological advancements, social and cultural trends, political stability, and the competitive landscape. Specifically concerning supply chain security, external issues might involve international trade agreements, the prevalence of organized crime targeting specific goods, changes in customs regulations in transit countries, or the security posture of partner organizations within the supply chain. The transition to a new standard, or the establishment of an SCSMS, necessitates a thorough assessment of how these internal and external factors can affect the organization's ability to achieve its security objectives and maintain the integrity of its supply chain. This process is foundational for defining the scope of the SCSMS and for identifying potential risks and opportunities that need to be managed. The objective is to understand the influences that can either hinder or facilitate the successful implementation and operation of the SCSMS, ensuring it remains relevant and effective in its purpose of protecting assets, information, and people throughout the supply chain. Question 15. When transitioning from ISO 28000-2007 to the updated framework for supply chain security management, what fundamental shift in approach is most critical for enhancing supplier security management, particularly concerning the integration of risk-based methodologies and a broader understanding of supplier security posture. Option A. Adopting a standardized checklist for all suppliers, ensuring basic security compliance without a differentiated risk assessment based on their criticality. Option B. Implementing a more dynamic, risk-based assessment of suppliers that includes ongoing monitoring and evaluation of their security culture and regulatory compliance throughout the supply chain lifecycle. Option C. Focusing solely on contractual obligations related to cargo security and physical asset protection for all suppliers, irrespective of their role in the supply chain. Option D. Expanding the supplier vetting process to include detailed financial audits and historical performance reviews to ensure long-term business stability. The correct answer is B. Implementing a more dynamic, risk-based assessment of suppliers that includes ongoing monitoring and evaluation of their security culture and regulatory compliance throughout the supply chain lifecycle. Explanation: the transition from ISO 28000-2007 to ISO 28000-2022 involves significant updates, particularly concerning the integration of Annex SL's High-Level Structure, HLS. Clause 8.1. 2 of ISO 28000-2007, which deals with supplier selection and assessment, focused on establishing criteria for supplier selection and regularly reviewing their performance against these criteria. The updated standard, ISO 28002-2022, which supersedes the 2007 version in terms of guidance for transition, though the core principles remain, emphasizes a risk-based approach throughout the supply chain. When transitioning, organizations must ensure that their supplier security management processes align with the new HLS requirements, including the enhanced focus on context of the organization, leadership commitment, planning for changes, and performance evaluation. Specifically, the approach to supplier security management in the transition requires a more dynamic assessment of risks associated with third parties, considering their ability to meet security requirements throughout the product or service lifecycle. This involves not just initial vetting, but also ongoing monitoring and re-evaluation based on evolving threat landscapes and performance data, which is a core tenet of the revised standards risk-based methodology. The concept of due diligence in supplier security management under the new framework extends to understanding the supplier's own security culture, their compliance with relevant security regulations, e.g., custom security programs like AEO or CTPAT, depending on the operational region, and their resilience to disruptions. The transition necessitates a review and potential overhaul of existing supplier evaluation matrices to incorporate these broader risk and resilience factors, moving beyond simple contractual compliance to a more holistic security assurance. Question 16. When implementing technological solutions for security monitoring and detection within a supply chain management system compliant with ISO 28000-2007, which strategic consideration is paramount for ensuring the system effectively addresses identified risks and supports continuous improvement? Option A. Deploying the latest commercially available security technologies without a thorough assessment of their direct applicability to the organization's unique risk profile and operational flow. Option B. Focusing solely on the most cost-effective technological solutions, assuming that basic tracking capabilities will suffice for most supply chain segments. Option C. Relying exclusively on automated detection systems, minimizing human oversight to reduce operational costs and potential for human error in monitoring. Option D. Prioritizing the integration of diverse sensor technologies that provide granular, real-time data directly correlated with specific identified threats and vulnerabilities within the operational context. The correct answer is D. Prioritizing the integration of diverse sensor technologies that provide granular, real-time data directly correlated with specific identified threats and vulnerabilities within the operational context. Explanation: the core principle of ISO 28000-2007 in relation to technology for security monitoring and detection is the integration of these tools to enhance visibility and provide early warning of potential security breaches or disruptions within the supply chain. Such technologies, including but not limited to GPS tracking, RFID, sensor networks, and advanced analytics, are not merely supplementary, but are integral to establishing a robust security management system. Their effectiveness is measured by their ability to detect anomalies, verify the integrity of goods and shipments, and provide real-time data for informed decision-making. The standard emphasizes a risk-based approach, meaning the selection and deployment of these technologies should be directly linked to identified supply chain vulnerabilities and threats. For instance, a high-value, time-sensitive shipment might warrant advanced real-time tracking and environmental monitoring, whereas a lower-risk commodity might only require basic identification and location services. The objective is to create a layered security approach where technology complements procedural controls and human oversight. This integration supports the continuous improvement cycle mandated by the standard, allowing for the refinement of monitoring strategies based on performance data and evolving threat landscapes. The aim is to achieve a proactive security posture, moving beyond reactive responses to potential incidents. The successful implementation hinges on ensuring interoperability, data security of the monitoring systems themselves, and appropriate training for personnel managing and interpreting the data generated. Question 17. An international logistics firm, previously adhering to a national security protocol, is undertaking a transition to ISO 28000-2007 for its global supply chain operations. Considering the fundamental principles of supply chain security management, as outlined in the standard and relevant international frameworks like the WCO SAFE framework, which strategic orientation would best facilitate a robust and compliant transition, ensuring long-term security resilience and operational continuity. Option A. Embedding security risk assessment and control measures into all supply chain planning, design, and operational processes, fostering a culture of security awareness and continuous improvement across all stakeholder interactions. Option B. Relying heavily on the security certifications of third-party logistics providers and carriers, with minimal internal oversight, to leverage their existing security measures and reduce the firm's direct security management burden. Option C. Primarily focusing on upgrading physical security infrastructure at key transit points and implementing stringent access controls for all personnel involved in cargo handling, assuming this addresses the majority of vulnerabilities. Option D. Implementing a reactive security strategy that prioritizes immediate response to detected breaches and diversions, with security training being conducted only after an incident has occurred to address specific procedural gaps. The correct answer is A. Embedding security risk assessment and control measures into all supply chain planning, design, and operational processes, fostering a culture of security awareness and continuous improvement across all stakeholder interactions. Explanation: the transition from an older standard to ISO 28000-2007, specifically concerning supply chain security management, necessitates a thorough understanding of the underlying principles that guide the establishment and maintenance of a secure supply chain. A core tenet of ISO 28000-2007 is the integration of security considerations throughout the entire supply chain lifecycle, from initial design and planning to operational execution and ongoing review. This involves a proactive approach to identifying and mitigating potential security risks, rather than a reactive response to incidents. Key principles include the systematic assessment of threats and vulnerabilities, the implementation of appropriate security controls tailored to the specific risks identified, and the continuous improvement of the security management system. Furthermore, the standard emphasizes the importance of a risk-based approach, ensuring that resources are allocated effectively to address the most significant security exposures. This aligns with the general principles of management system standards, promoting a cycle of plan-do-check-act. The concept of due diligence in security is paramount, requiring organizations to demonstrate they have taken reasonable steps to protect their assets and operations. This includes understanding the security practices of partners and suppliers, as mandated by regulations such as the SAFE Framework of Standards by the World Customs Organization, which promotes harmonized supply chain security. Therefore, the most effective approach for a transitioning organization is to embed security into its core business processes and culture, ensuring that security is not an add-on, but an integral part of how the supply chain operates. Question 18. A global logistics provider, Transglobal Freight, is undergoing a transition to align its operations with ISO 28000-2007 for supply chain security management. They are specifically evaluating the adoption of quantitative risk assessment techniques to identify and prioritize potential security vulnerabilities within their complex international network. Considering the principles of ISO 28000-2007, which of the following approaches most accurately reflects a core quantitative methodology for assessing supply chain security risks, focusing on objective measurement rather than subjective interpretation? Option A. Developing a scenario-based risk register where each potential threat is described, and the impact is assessed based on a general understanding of its potential disruption, without any explicit numerical quantification of likelihood or impact. Option B. Establishing numerical scales for the probability of specific security incidents occurring and assigning monetary values to the potential consequences of those incidents, then calculating a risk score by multiplying these two values to enable prioritization. Option C. Conducting workshops with experienced personnel to qualitatively rank risks based on their perceived likelihood and potential severity, using descriptive terms like high or low without assigning numerical values. Option D. Utilizing a Delphi technique with a panel of experts to reach a consensus on the most critical risks, focusing on the relative importance of threats without generating specific probability or impact figures. The correct answer is B. Establishing numerical scales for the probability of specific security incidents occurring and assigning monetary values to the potential consequences of those incidents, then calculating a risk score by multiplying these two values to enable prioritization. Explanation. The scenario describes a transition from a legacy system to a new supply chain security management system, necessitating a reassessment of risks. When employing quantitative risk assessment techniques for supply chain security under ISO 28000-2007, a critical step is to establish a consistent framework for evaluating likelihood and impact. Likelihood, in this context, refers to the probability of a specific security event occurring within the supply chain. Impact quantifies the severity of the consequences should that event materialize, encompassing financial losses, reputational damage, operational disruptions, and potential regulatory noncompliance. A robust quantitative approach involves assigning numerical values to these factors. For likelihood, this might involve using historical data, expert judgment quantified into probability ranges, e.g., very low \0, 0 1p \la 0, 1 low \0, 1p la 0, 3 medium \0, 3p la 0, 7 high \0, 7p la 0, 9 very high \0, 9p la 1, 0 For impact monetary values or defined scales of severity, e.g., minor, $0 $10 000 moderate, $10 001 $100 000 severe, $100 001 $1 000 catastrophic, $1 000 000 are assigned. The risk level is then calculated by multiplying the numerical value of likelihood by the numerical value of impact, often resulting in a risk score, e.g., risk equals likelihood x impact. This score allows for prioritization of risks, enabling the organization to focus resources on the most critical threats. The effectiveness of this quantitative assessment is heavily reliant on the quality and relevance of the data used to derive the likelihood and impact values, and the clear definition of the scales employed, ensuring consistency and comparability across different identified risks within the supply chain. The goal is to move beyond qualitative descriptions to objective, data-driven risk management decisions that align with the organization's risk appetite and the requirements of ISO 28000-2007. Question 19. Consider a global logistics firm specializing in high-value electronics that is undergoing a transition to ISO 28000-2007. The firm's executive leadership is focused on embedding security planning into its existing business processes, rather than treating security as a separate departmental function. Which of the following approaches best exemplifies this integration, ensuring that security considerations are proactively addressed throughout the supply chain lifecycle, in alignment with the principles of ISO 28000-2007? Option A. Establishing a cross-functional supply chain security task force comprising representatives from operations, procurement, IT, and legal, tasked with reviewing and approving all new business process designs for security compliance before implementation. Option B. Conducting annual security awareness training sessions for all employees, focusing on general security best practices and the organization's security policy. Option C. Implementing a dedicated security software system that automatically flags potential security risks in real time based on predefined rules, with manual intervention required for remediation. Option D. Developing a comprehensive set of security standard operating procedures, SOP, that are distributed to all relevant departments for voluntary adoption and adherence. The correct answer is A. Establishing a cross-functional supply chain security task force comprising representatives from operations, procurement, IT, and legal, tasked with reviewing and approving all new business process designs for security compliance before implementation. Explanation: the transition to ISO 28000-2007 from previous security management practices, particularly concerning the integration of security planning into core business processes, requires a strategic alignment. This integration ensures that security is not an afterthought but a fundamental consideration in operational design and decision-making. Clause 5.2. 1 of ISO 28000-2007, Security Policy, mandates that the organization establish a security policy that is appropriate to its purpose and context, and includes a commitment to security objectives. Furthermore, Clause 5.3, Security Planning, requires that the organization establish and maintain security objectives and the processes necessary to achieve them. The integration of security planning into business processes means that security risk assessments, mitigation strategies, and controls are embedded within the life cycle of business activities, from procurement and logistics to product development and delivery. This proactive approach, as outlined in the standard, helps to identify and manage security risks that could impact the supply chain's ability to deliver its intended value. It involves ensuring that security considerations are part of the initial design of business processes, not merely retrofitted. This aligns with the principle of embedding security throughout the organization's operations, thereby enhancing overall supply chain resilience and security posture. A key aspect is the continuous improvement of these integrated processes, ensuring that security planning remains relevant and effective in the face of evolving threats and business changes, which is a core tenet of management system standards. Question 20. When assessing the effectiveness of security measures implemented as part of an ISO 28000-2007 compliant supply chain security management system, which of the following approaches most directly addresses the need to verify that the system is achieving its intended security objectives and that controls are functioning as designed? Option A. Reviewing external threat intelligence reports to identify emerging risks and updating the risk register without correlating these updates to the performance of existing security measures. Option B. Conducting periodic internal audits focused on the operational efficiency of security personnel and the timely delivery of goods. Option C. Analyzing incident reports to identify trends in security breaches and then adjusting security training programs based on the most frequent types of incidents. Option D. Establishing a framework for measuring the performance of critical security controls against predefined metrics and evaluating deviations to identify systemic weaknesses or control failures. The correct answer is B. Conducting periodic internal audits focused on the operational efficiency of security personnel and the timely delivery of goods. Explanation: the core of monitoring, measurement, analysis, and evaluation within ISO 28000-2007 for supply chain security management is to determine the conformity and effectiveness of the security management system. This involves establishing processes to track key security performance indicators, KPI, and to assess whether the implemented security measures are achieving their intended outcomes. For a transition to a new standard, or even within an established one, understanding the effectiveness of security controls against identified threats and vulnerabilities is paramount. This evaluation should not be a static review, but an ongoing process that informs corrective actions and improvements. The standard emphasizes that the organization must determine what needs to be monitored and measured, the methods for monitoring, measurement, analysis, and evaluation, when these activities should be performed, and who should perform them. The ultimate goal is to provide objective evidence of the SCSMS performance and to identify areas where security posture can be enhanced, thereby reducing risks to the supply chain. This aligns with the principle of continual improvement inherent in management system standards. Question 21. Consider a global logistics firm, Transglobal Freight, which is undergoing its transition to the updated ISO 28000 standard. Their current security program, established under ISO 28000-2007, includes documented procedures for cargo screening at origin and destination hubs, basic background checks for key personnel, and a defined incident response plan for theft. During their transition audit, it was identified that, while these measures address some risks, they do not adequately cover the security vulnerabilities associated with third-party carriers operating in regions with higher geopolitical instability, nor do they sufficiently address the integrity of digital information exchanged between disparate systems. Which of the following strategic adjustments to their security program best reflects the comprehensive approach required by the updated ISO 28000 standard for managing security throughout the supply chain? Option A. Develop and implement a robust third-party security vetting process for all carriers, including regular audits and performance monitoring, and establish secure data exchange protocols with encryption and access controls for all digital communications within the supply chain. Option B. Increase the frequency of physical cargo inspections at all transit points and mandate additional security training for all warehouse staff, focusing on awareness of potential insider threats. Option C. Revise the incident response plan to include a broader range of potential security breaches, such as cyber attacks, and establish a formal process for reporting security anomalies to national regulatory bodies. Option D. Allocate a larger budget for technology solutions, such as advanced tracking systems, and implement a policy of zero tolerance for any security breaches, regardless of their origin or impact. The correct answer is A. Develop and implement a robust third-party security vetting process for all carriers, including regular audits and performance monitoring, and establish secure data exchange protocols with encryption and access controls for all digital communications within the supply chain. Explanation: the transition from ISO 28000-2007 to the updated standard necessitates a thorough review and adaptation of existing security measures. Clause 4.2.1 of ISO 28000-2007 outlines the fundamental requirements for establishing a security management system, emphasizing the need to identify and assess security risks throughout the supply chain. Implementing security measures requires a holistic approach that considers various threat vectors and vulnerabilities at each stage. The selection and application of these measures are guided by the risk assessment outcomes and the organization's security policy. When transitioning, organizations must ensure that their current controls remain effective and are aligned with any new or revised requirements introduced by the updated standard, which often involve more granular considerations for specific supply chain nodes and interdependencies. This includes evaluating the security posture of partners, the integrity of information flows, and the physical security of goods in transit and storage. The process is iterative, involving continuous monitoring and improvement to maintain the robustness of the supply chain security management system against evolving threats. The core principle is to integrate security into the operational fabric of the supply chain, rather than treating it as an add-on. Question 22. Assessment of the strategic shift between ISO 28000-2002 and ISO 28000-2007 reveals a fundamental evolution in its integration with established management system frameworks. Considering the principles of the Plan-Do-Check Act, PDCA cycle, and the overarching goal of enhancing supply chain resilience, which of the following best characterizes the primary driver for the structural and conceptual modifications introduced in the 2007 revision concerning transportation security measures? Option A. To introduce a comprehensive set of prescriptive security protocols for all modes of transport, overriding existing national and international regulations. Option B. To solely focus on the technological advancements in tracking and tracing, diminishing the importance of human factors and procedural controls in transportation security. Option C. To facilitate seamless integration of the SCSMS with other ISO management systems, thereby promoting a unified approach to organizational risk management and operational efficiency. Option D. To mandate specific security technologies for container sealing and vehicle tracking, irrespective of the risk assessment outcomes for individual supply chain segments. correct answer is C. To facilitate seamless integration of the SCSMS with other ISO management systems, thereby promoting a unified approach to organizational risk management and operational efficiency. Explanation: the transition from ISO 28000-2002 to ISO 28000-2007 involved a significant shift in focus, particularly regarding the integration of security management principles within the broader context of organizational management systems. While the 2002 version provided a foundational framework, the 2007 revision aligned with the high-level structure and common terminology of other ISO management system standards, such as ISO 9001, Quality Management, and ISO 14001, Environmental Management. This alignment aimed to facilitate the integration of supply chain security management with existing management systems, promoting a more holistic and systematic approach to risk management. The 2007 standard emphasized the Plan Do Check Act (PDCA) cycle as the underlying process for establishing, implementing, maintaining, and continually improving the supply chain security management system (SCSMS). It also placed greater importance on leadership commitment, stakeholder engagement, and the establishment of clear security objectives and performance indicators. The emphasis on a risk-based approach, which was present in the 2002 version, was further strengthened, requiring organizations to identify, assess, and treat supply chain security risks in a systematic manner. Furthermore, the 2007 standard provided more detailed guidance on security measures applicable to various stages of the supply chain, including transportation, warehousing, and customs clearance, reflecting the evolving landscape of global trade and security threats. The transition aimed to make the standard more practical and adaptable for a wider range of organizations, regardless of their size or complexity. Question 23. When transitioning to a revised supply chain security management framework, a logistics firm specializing in high-value electronics identified an objective to enhance the integrity of its international transit points. To operationalize this, they aim to reduce instances of pilferage by 15% within the next 18 months. Which of the following best reflects the strategic alignment required for setting such a target within the context of a security management system transition, considering potential regulatory influences and the need for measurable outcomes? Option A. The target should be revised to a broader goal of improving transit security to allow for more flexibility in operational adjustments, as specific percentage reductions can be difficult to guarantee. Option B. The target should prioritize compliance with the latest international customs security directives, even if it means a less ambitious percentage reduction in pilferage, to ensure legal adherence. Option C. The target should be primarily driven by cost-saving initiatives, with the 15% pilferage reduction serving as a secondary benefit rather than a primary driver for objective setting. Option D. The target is directly linked to a risk assessment finding regarding vulnerabilities at transit hubs and is measurable through inventory reconciliation reports, aligning with the security policy's intent to protect assets. The correct answer is D. The target is directly linked to a risk assessment finding regarding vulnerabilities at transit hubs and is measurable through inventory reconciliation reports, aligning with the security policy's intent to protect assets. Explanation: the establishment of security objectives and targets within a supply chain security management system, as guided by principles akin to ISO 28000-2007, necessitates a clear linkage to the organization's overall security policy and the identified risks within the supply chain. Objectives are broad statements of intent, while targets are specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound, SMART, achievements that contribute to the objectives. The process begins with a thorough risk assessment to understand potential threats, vulnerabilities, and their impact on the supply chain's integrity and continuity. Based on this assessment, the organization defines overarching security goals. These goals are then translated into actionable targets. For instance, if an objective is to reduce the likelihood of unauthorized access to sensitive cargo, a target might be to achieve a 95% compliance rate with pre-employment background checks for all personnel handling such cargo within the next fiscal year. Selection of appropriate metrics for these targets is crucial for monitoring progress and demonstrating the effectiveness of the security management system. The alignment of objectives and targets with the specific operational context, regulatory requirements, such as those pertaining to customs security or the transport of hazardous materials, and the organization's capacity, is paramount. This ensures that the security measures implemented are both effective and efficient, contributing to the overall resilience and trustworthiness of the supply chain. The transition to a more robust security posture requires a systematic approach to setting these measurable outcomes. Question 24. When an organization is transitioning to ISO 28000-2007, what is the fundamental requirement for establishing accountability and oversight for the supply chain security management system, as stipulated by the standard concerning personnel? Option A. Delegating security responsibilities to individual department heads without a formal appointment, assuming they will integrate security into their existing operational mandates. Option B. Creating a cross-functional security committee comprised of representatives from logistics, procurement, and operations, with the primary role of reviewing security incidents. Option C. Appointing a dedicated chief security officer with overarching authority to implement all security protocols across the entire supply chain, regardless of existing departmental structures. Option D. Designating a management representative with the explicit authority and responsibility to ensure system conformity and report on its performance to top management. The correct answer is D. Designating a management representative with the explicit authority and responsibility to ensure system conformity and report on its performance to top management. Explanation. The transition to ISO 28000-2007 requires a clear definition of roles, responsibilities, and authorities within the supply chain security management system. Clause 4. 1. 2. Titled Roles, Responsibilities, and Authorities mandates that top management assign and communicate these aspects. Specifically, it requires the establishment of a management representative who, irrespective of other duties, is responsible and has the authority to ensure the supply chain security management system conforms to the requirements of the standard, to report on its performance to top management, and to promote awareness of customer requirements throughout the organization. While other personnel will have specific security responsibilities, the management representative is the linchpin for the system's overall integrity and effectiveness. This role is crucial for driving the security culture, managing nonconformities, and ensuring the system's continual improvement. Without this clearly defined and empowered role, the management system can falter, lacking a central point of accountability and oversight, which is a critical failure in establishing a robust security framework. The standard emphasizes that all personnel with security responsibilities should be competent on the basis of education, training, experience, skills, and other qualities. Question 25. During the transition of a global logistics firm to ISO 28000-2007 compliance, the security team is evaluating the procedural controls for personnel operating at high-security transit hubs. Which of the following approaches to background screening for new hires and existing staff accessing sensitive cargo areas best reflects the intent of establishing robust procedural security in a supply chain context? Option A. Implementing a multifaceted background investigation that includes verification of employment history, criminal record checks, and reference validation, with a clear documented process for handling discrepancies, all conducted in compliance with relevant data privacy regulations like GDPR. Option B. Mandating annual refresher training on general security awareness for all staff, but foregoing specific background checks due to time constraints during the transition period. Option C. Conducting brief, informal interviews with previous supervisors and relying solely on self-reported information regarding past conduct for all personnel, irrespective of their access level. Option D. Utilizing a single, unverified online background check service that provides a basic criminal record scan without further investigation into employment or character references. The correct answer is A. Implementing a multifaceted background investigation that includes verification of employment history, criminal record checks, and reference validation, with a clear documented process for handling discrepancies, all conducted in compliance with relevant data privacy regulations like GDPR. Explanation. The question pertains to the procedural security controls within the context of ISO 28000-2007, specifically focusing on the transition phase and the application of background checks for personnel involved in critical supply chain nodes. The standard emphasizes the need to identify and manage security risks throughout the supply chain. Procedural security controls, such as vetting personnel, are fundamental to mitigating insider threats and ensuring the integrity of operations. When considering the transition to a new security framework or the implementation of enhanced controls, the scope and depth of background checks are crucial. These checks are not merely a formality, but a risk management tool designed to verify the trustworthiness and suitability of individuals who will have access to sensitive information, assets, or operational areas. The effectiveness of such checks is directly proportional to their comprehensiveness, which includes verifying employment history, criminal records, and potentially other relevant data points, all within legal and ethical boundaries. The objective is to prevent individuals with a history of malicious intent or compromised judgment from jeopardizing the security of the supply chain. Therefore, the most appropriate approach during a transition, or for ongoing security, is to implement thorough and documented checks that align with the identified risks and the sensitivity of the roles. This aligns with the principle of due diligence in security management. Question 26. A global logistics provider specializing in high-value electronics, operating under strict international trade regulations like the US CTPAT and EU AEO programs, is transitioning its security management system to align with ISO 28000-2007. The organization has identified a significant risk of cargo theft and unauthorized access at its primary distribution hub. They are considering implementing advanced physical security measures at this facility. Which of the following approaches would be considered the most effective in demonstrating compliance and achieving robust supply chain security under the ISO 28000-2007 framework for this specific scenario? Option A. Implementing a layered physical security strategy that includes advanced access control systems at all entry points, continuous CCTV surveillance with anomaly detection software, and a robust visitor management protocol, all directly mapped to specific identified risks in the supply chain security assessment and subject to regular internal audits. Option B. Relying solely on external security consultants to dictate the physical security measures, assuming their general expertise will cover all potential vulnerabilities without a thorough internal risk assessment tailored to the organization's specific supply chain. Option C. Focusing exclusively on procedural controls and personnel training, assuming that well-trained staff can compensate for any deficiencies in physical security infrastructure, thereby minimizing investment in technology. Option D. Installing the most sophisticated and expensive security technology available, such as laser grids and armed guards, without a direct correlation to the specific threats identified in the risk assessment, prioritizing a perception of high security. The correct answer is A. Implementing a layered physical security strategy that includes advanced access control systems at all entry points, continuous CCTV surveillance with anomaly detection software, and a robust visitor management protocol, all directly mapped to specific identified risks in the supply chain security assessment and subject to regular internal audits. Explanation: the transition to ISO 28000-2007 from previous security paradigms emphasizes a risk-based approach to supply chain security. When evaluating physical security controls, particularly in a scenario involving international freight forwarding and the need to comply with various customs regulations, such as the Customs Trade Partnership Against Terrorism, CTPAT, or Authorized Economic Operator, EO programs, the effectiveness of a control is measured by its ability to mitigate identified risks. Access control systems, such as biometric scanners or multi-factor authentication at loading docks, directly address the risk of unauthorized entry and tampering. Surveillance systems, including CCTV with intelligent analytics, monitor for suspicious activity and provide evidence of breaches. However, the primary driver for selecting and implementing these controls within the framework of ISO 28000-2007 is the documented risk assessment that identifies specific vulnerabilities and threats to the supply chain. The standard requires that security measures be proportionate to the identified risks and that their implementation be integrated into the overall supply chain security management system. Therefore, the most effective approach is one that demonstrably reduces the likelihood or impact of identified threats by implementing controls that are directly linked to the risk assessment findings and are verifiable through audits and performance monitoring. The integration of these physical controls with procedural controls and personnel security measures forms a comprehensive security posture. Question 27. During the transition of a supply chain security management system from ISO 28000-2007 to a newer version, a critical review of the emergency preparedness and response framework is undertaken. The organization identifies a need to enhance its procedures for managing disruptions caused by unforeseen geopolitical events that could impact international transit routes. Which of the following actions represents the most effective approach to updating the emergency preparedness and response plan in alignment with the principles of the updated standard? Option A. Update the emergency contact list and conduct a single tabletop exercise to simulate a response to a major transit route blockage. Option B. Rely solely on contractual agreements with third-party logistics providers to manage all emergency response activities related to transit disruptions. Option C. Immediately procure advanced surveillance technology to monitor all international transit routes for potential disruptions without altering existing response protocols. Option D. Conduct a comprehensive risk assessment focusing on potential geopolitical disruptions and their impact on supply chain nodes, then develop revised response protocols and communication plans, followed by drills and training to validate their effectiveness. The correct answer is D. Conduct a comprehensive risk assessment focusing on potential geopolitical disruptions and their impact on supply chain nodes, then develop revised response protocols and communication plans, followed by drills and training to validate their effectiveness. Explanation. The transition from ISO 28000-2007 to ISO 28000-2023 or subsequent revisions necessitates a thorough review and update of an organization's supply chain security management system. Clause 8.4 of ISO 28000-2007, which deals with emergency preparedness and response, requires an organization to identify potential emergency situations and to plan for how it will respond to them. This involves establishing procedures for responding to actual emergencies, including notification, evacuation, and containment measures. Furthermore, it mandates regular testing and review of these emergency response plans. When considering the transition, an organization must evaluate how its current emergency preparedness and response framework aligns with the updated requirements of the new standard. This includes assessing the effectiveness of existing procedures, the adequacy of resources allocated for response, the clarity of roles and responsibilities during an incident, and the mechanisms for communicating with stakeholders. Key aspect of the transition is ensuring that the updated plans are not only comprehensive in addressing a wider range of potential threats, e.g., cyber attacks impacting logistics, pandemics affecting workforce availability, but also are integrated with the overall security management system, including risk assessment and continual improvement processes. The focus shifts towards a more proactive and resilient approach, emphasizing the ability to anticipate, withstand, adapt to, and recover from disruptions. Therefore, the most effective approach during transition is to conduct a gap analysis of current emergency preparedness against the revised standards clauses, and then implement necessary enhancements to address identified deficiencies, ensuring that the organization can effectively manage and mitigate the impact of unforeseen events within its supply chain. Question 28. When transitioning to an integrated management system that includes ISO 28000-2007 for supply chain security, how can an organization most effectively harmonize its security management processes with those of ISO 9001-2015 for quality management and ISO 14001-2015 for environmental management, considering the common elements found in the high-level structure of these standards? Option A. By implementing a separate management review process for each standard, with no overlap in the data analyzed or the personnel involved, to ensure independent oversight of each management system. Option B. By prioritizing the implementation of ISO 28000-2007 requirements exclusively, treating ISO 9001 and ISO 14001 as secondary considerations that do not influence the core security management system design. Option C. By developing a unified policy and objective framework that addresses security, quality, and environmental aspects, and aligning risk assessment methodologies and internal audit programs across all three standards to leverage common processes and reduce redundancy. Option D. by creating distinct operational procedures for each standard, ensuring that security protocols are entirely separate from quality control measures and environmental impact assessments to maintain specialized focus. The correct answer is C. By developing a unified policy and objective framework that addresses security, quality, and environmental aspects, and aligning risk assessment methodologies and internal audit programs across all three standards to leverage common processes and reduce redundancy. Explanation: the integration of ISO 28000-2007 with other management system standards, such as ISO 9001, Quality Management, and ISO 14001, Environmental Management, leverages common elements found in the high-level structure HLS of ISO management system standards. This common structure facilitates the development of an integrated management system. For ISO 28000-2007, the focus is on establishing, implementing, maintaining, and continually improving a supply chain security management system. When integrating with ISO 9001, the organization can align processes related to risk assessment, management review, and corrective actions. For instance, the risk-based thinking inherent in ISO 9001 for quality can be extended to identify and manage security risks within the supply chain. Similarly, ISO 14001 approach to identifying environmental aspects and impacts can inform the identification of security vulnerabilities. The key is to avoid duplication of effort by harmonizing documentation, auditing, and management review processes. The Plan-Do-Check Act, PDCA cycle, a fundamental principle in many ISO standards, provides a consistent framework for continuous improvement across all integrated systems. Therefore, an organization seeking to integrate ISO 28000-2007 with ISO 9001 and ISO 14001 would focus on aligning the scope, policy, objectives, and operational controls of each system to ensure synergy and efficiency, rather than creating separate, isolated systems. The transition to an integrated system means that the security policy, objectives, and operational controls of ISO 28000-2007 are considered within the broader context of the organization's quality and environmental commitments, ensuring that security measures do not negatively impact quality or environmental performance, and vice versa. Question 29. When establishing the acceptable risk levels for a global logistics network operating under evolving security mandates, which foundational element most critically dictates the upper bounds of tolerable threats and vulnerabilities, considering both compliance and operational viability? Option A. The perceived risk appetite of the highest-ranking executive responsible for supply chain operation, irrespective of broader legal or policy frameworks. Option B. The historical frequency of security incidents within the industry, without specific consideration for the organization's unique operational context or regulatory environment. Option C. The organization's documented security policy and its alignment with applicable international trade agreements and national security legislation. Option D. The cost-benefit analysis of implementing the most advanced security technologies, regardless of their necessity for compliance or strategic alignment. The correct answer is C. The organization's documented security policy and its alignment with applicable international trade agreements and national security legislation. Explanation: the transition from ISO 28000-2007 to a later version, or the ongoing application of its principles, necessitates a robust framework for determining acceptable risk levels within the supply chain. This process is not arbitrary but is guided by a confluence of factors. Firstly, the organization's stated security policy and objectives provide the foundational direction. These policies articulate the desired security posture and the overall commitment to managing risks. Secondly, legal and regulatory requirements are paramount. Compliance with relevant national and international laws, such as those pertaining to customs, trade facilitation, and critical infrastructure protection, directly influences what levels of risk are permissible. For instance, if a particular jurisdiction mandates stringent controls against the introduction of unauthorized materials, the acceptable risk level for such introductions would be extremely low, approaching zero. Thirdly, stakeholder expectations, including those of customers, partners, and insurers, play a significant role. A high-profile client might demand a lower risk tolerance than a less sensitive engagement. Finally, the organization's financial and operational capacity to implement and maintain risk mitigation measures is a practical constraint. The acceptable risk level must be achievable within the organization's resource allocation. Therefore, a comprehensive determination involves aligning the security policy, legal obligations, stakeholder needs, and available resources to establish risk acceptance criteria that are both effective and feasible for the supply chain security management. Question 30. An international logistics company operating a key transshipment facility has noted a concerning uptick in the unauthorized removal of sensitive electronic components. Given the requirements for facility security under ISO 28000-2007, which of the following strategies would most effectively address this escalating threat by enhancing the integrity of access and movement within the facility? Option A. Increasing the frequency of physical inventory audits for all outgoing shipments, regardless of value, to identify discrepancies. Option B. Establishing a dedicated security team to patrol the perimeter of the facility at irregular intervals throughout the day and night. Option C. Implementing a multi-factor authentication system for all entry points to secure storage zones and augmenting CCTV coverage with intelligent analytics to detect anomalous behavior. Option D. Mandating that all personnel wear distinct identification badges that are visible at all times while on company property. The correct answer is C. Implementing a multi-factor authentication system for all entry points to secure storage zones and augmenting CCTV coverage with intelligent analytics to detect anomalous behavior. Explanation: the transition to ISO 28000-2007 requires a comprehensive review and enhancement of existing facility security measures to align with the standard's principles. Clause 7.3.2 of ISO 28000-2007, Physical Security, mandates that organizations establish and maintain appropriate physical controls to protect assets and operations within the supply chain. This includes securing facilities, entry points, and sensitive areas against unauthorized access, theft, and damage. When considering a scenario where a logistics hub experiences an increase in pilferage of high-value goods, a thorough assessment of the facility's physical security posture is paramount. This involves evaluating the effectiveness of existing access control systems, perimeter security, internal surveillance, and personnel screening. The standard emphasizes a risk-based approach, meaning that security measures should be proportionate to the identified threats and vulnerabilities. Therefore, the most effective response would involve a layered security strategy that addresses multiple points of potential compromise. This strategy would typically include upgrading electronic surveillance systems to cover blind spots, implementing stricter access protocols for designated high-value storage areas, and potentially enhancing background checks for personnel with access to these zones. The objective is to create a robust defense in depth that deters, detects, and responds to security breaches, thereby reducing the likelihood and impact of pilferage. This aligns with the standard's overall goal of enhancing supply chain security through systematic risk management and the implementation of effective security controls.